It is not remarkable that so many of the reported ghosts and phantoms and supernatural visions have been observed just as night was falling, for that is a time when the mind is fatigued and is most subject to hallucinations. And yet, there are some, like that which Captain Nolan saw on the plains of Normandy, which cannot be so easily explained away.
It was during the latter days of the First World War. The cavalry troops under the command of Captain David Nolan had rendered valuable service in a score of crucial battles. They had been under fire for weeks on end, and now they were retiring behind the lines for a rest they had fully earned. The long column of horsemen moved slowly, wearily through the twilight. At their head rode Captain Nolan and two other officers. They were discussing how they intended to spend their leave.
You men can celebrate all you like. The only thing I want to do is to sleep.
Each man to his own taste, Digby. Mine happened to run toward wine, women, and song.
That sounds much more attractive to me.
In the state I'm in, I couldn't even think of... Good Lord.
Captain Nolan broke off abruptly in the middle of the sentence, for it was just at that moment that he saw the phantom horsemen. They were clad in white, on white steeds, and they rode in a straight, silent column, paralleling the line of the captain's own men, not more than a dozen yards away. So swiftly did they move, and so soundlessly, that their horses' hooves seemed scarcely to be touching the ground. And the column did not end. It went on and on, one ghostly figure following another through the gathering dusk. Captain Nolan's first impulse was to turn to his fellow officers to call their attention to the amazing vision. But then he thought better of it, so he rode on in silence. For some reason, the men beside him had grown silent too. But a few moments later, while the captain's eyes were still fastened on the incredible cavalcade, Lieutenant Digby said suddenly,
You may have something there after all, Captain. I could stand a good night's rest myself.
Nolan turned sharply and peered into Digby's face, as though he was seeking something there.
What made you change your mind?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose I'm more tired than I thought.
It seemed to hit you rather abruptly.
Yes, it did, didn't it, Captain?
And that was all the lieutenant would say. And once again, silence fell among the three men. But this time, it was short-lived. For after another moment or so, Lieutenant Wayne blurted out violently, almost hysterically,
I can't stand this any longer. You see them, so does Digby. We're not dreaming, and we're not just tired either. That column of cavalrymen is really there. If it weren't, why should all three of us be watching it?
Yes, each of the three officers had seen the column at the same moment, and each had remained silent for fear of making himself look ridiculous. Night descended swiftly now, and the phantom horsemen were blotted from view. But at the next town, Captain Nolan sent back a searching party. They returned with the inevitable answer. No other cavalry troops were in the vicinity. None could have been. And yet, afterward, Captain Nolan and Lieutenants Digby and Wayne, all men of unquestionable integrity, were willing to swear that they had seen the same identical vision. A vision incredible but true.
Literally millions of human beings have known the sensation of leaving their native Earth and soaring above the clouds. And still, there are many for whom flight still holds a sense of mystery and wonder. That feeling is not wholly groundless is evidenced, perhaps, by the strange experience of Lieutenant Morand.
Even as far back as 1923, there were those who realized that if war should ever come again, its outcome would be, in a large part, determined by air power. And so, in France, as in other nations of Europe, men were being rigorously trained in the techniques of flying, strafing, and bombing. Second Lieutenant Morand was a member of the embryonic French Air Force. And on the afternoon of September 22nd, he went aloft to engage in shooting practice over a field near Gadeau. In front of him, in the pilot's seat, was Sergeant Jean Daubert.
When I give you the signal, Sergeant, begin your dive. All right, now. Not bad, sir. Not good either. Let's go back and try it again.
The plane circled the field and once again approached the target.
All right, Sergeant. Bravo, sir. You did it that time. You must have... Lieutenant, what is the matter?
The sergeant stared at the man behind him in amazement. Lieutenant Morant had slumped back in his seat. His eyes were closed, and his face was distorted with pain.
What is the trouble, Lieutenant?
At that moment, the lieutenant fell forward, face down. And it was then that the sergeant saw the great red splotch spreading across his shoulders.
Mon Dieu, he's been shot.
Sergeant Aubert landed the plane as quickly as possible. And while the lieutenant was being lifted carefully from the cockpit and transferred to a waiting ambulance, he made his report to his commanding officer.
We were a couple of 100 feet up, and there weren't any other planes in the air and nobody on the ground beneath us. It must have been his own machine gun that did it. One of the bullets ricocheted somehow off the ground or the target. It bounced back and hit him between the shoulders. I know it sounds crazy, but it could not...
So that was the explanation that was officially accepted, at least for a few hours. But later that afternoon, Sergeant Aubert dropped around to the emergency hospital to inquire about the lieutenant's condition.
How is he doing, Doctor? You had to operate?
I had to remove the bullet. It was deeply embedded.
Imagine a man getting hit in the back with a bullet from his own machine gun.
I think you're mistaken, Sergeant. The bullet I just took out of his back came from a .32 revolver.
But where the .32 revolver came from, no one has ever been able to learn. The official record of the case of Lieutenant Morant was changed from accidental injury from his own weapon to injury, either accidental or intentional, from a weapon in hands of a person unknown. And to this day, the origin of that bullet remains a subject for speculation. A mystery, incredible but true.